What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. Today I'm doing part 2 of my Rhino Rocktober 2025 list. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So this is part 2 of my series looking at the Rhino Rocktober 2025 list. If you missed part 1, go back and check that one out, because there's a big list this year for Rocktober. There's 43 total albums. So in part 1, I looked at just the 16 titles coming out for October 3rd. So in part 2, I'm going to look at the 13 titles coming out over the next 2 weeks. So I'm looking at October 10th and 17th. But if you're unfamiliar with what Rocktober is, Rhino does a couple of events during the year. They do Start Your Year Off Right in January, and then they do Rocktober in October. What they do during these events is every week they'll release, sometimes they're box sets, sometimes they're limited edition releases, sometimes they do color variants, sometimes they're albums that haven't been available in a really long time. Another thing they've started doing recently is they'll reissue high fidelity releases or Rhino Reserve releases on these dates also. So lots of good stuff coming out over the month of October. It was way too much for me to fit into just one video, so I decided to do a whole series of videos trying to cover these albums. So there's actually going to be 3 parts to the series. You've got part 2. Make sure you go back and check out part 1. I'm going to do part 3 tomorrow. So we're kicking off October 10th with 4 releases from Dream Theater, which, Rhino started doing this. I think it was Start Your Year Off Right. They started doing these Dream Theater releases. I think they started off by doing the first 5 albums from Dream Theater, and now they're doing the next series of releases from the band. So the first album I got from Dream Theater is 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. Came out back in 2002. It was their 6th studio album. 2 LP release. It's going to be on clear vinyl. It's going to run about $37. I was a little surprised to see this was just 2 LPs, because it's the band's second longest album. It comes in just under 100 minutes long. And you can fit it on 2 LPs. I mean, once you start getting a little over, it's like 20 to 22 minutes is kind of the sweet spot per side. Once you start getting over that, you start kind of getting into, it starts getting a little too compressed on the albums. So, I mean, realistically, this probably could have been 5 sides of a 3 LP release if they really wanted to properly space it out, but I'm sure it's going to be just fine as 2 LPs. This is an album where the band really, I think, tried to push the boundaries of their music. Commercially, it did really well. It hit number 46 on the Billboard 200. I think musically, it's an album that kind of set them up for what they would do over the next several albums. So that's coming out on the 10th. And then the next one you got is Train of Thought. It came out in 2003. It was their 7th studio album. 2 LP release. It's also on clear vinyl. It's also going to run about $37. It was a darker and heavier album than the band had done before. I think because of those heavier themes on this album, they were able to appeal to a whole new audience. I think it's also an album that showed the musical versatility of this band, the way they were able to really push themselves into new musical territories. Dream Theater is also releasing Octavarium on the 3rd. It was released in 2005. It was their 8th studio album. 2 LP releases on clear vinyl. It's also going to run you $37. This is a little bit of a different album because I think they really tried to balance the heaviness from Train of Thought with the more melodic sound that the band had on previous albums. I know going into the recording process, the band really wanted to focus on creating more of a classic Dream Theater sounding album. And the end result ended up being probably one of their more ambitious albums. And they tried to utilize all their different musical influences while trying to still create less of a musically complex album. And commercially, it did really well. It was their 2nd highest charting album on the Billboard 200 at that point, hitting number 36. So you get that one coming out on the 10th, and then the 4th album from them coming out that day is Systematic Chaos. Came out back in 2007. It was their 9th studio album. It's all the same stuff. 2 LP release, going to be on clear vinyl. It's going to run you a little bit more. It's going to run you about $39. And this album is a return to that darker sound from a couple albums earlier. It ended up being one of the band's most successful albums. It was in the top 10 in a bunch of different countries. It was the band's first album to break into the top 20 here in the US. I really credit this album as being the album that made them a household name. On October 10th, you've also got Tusk from Fleetwood Mac getting reissued. Came out back in 1979. It was their 12th studio album. 2 LP releases going to be on cobalt blue vinyl. It's going to run about $35. This is the album where Fleetwood Mac really tried to expand their sound beyond what they had done on their previous couple of albums and became much more of an experimental band. They incorporated more elements of pop in there. There's some new wave. There's even some disco in this album. Initially, it was not well received by fans and critics, but I think looking at this album now, decades later, I think a lot of people look at this album now as a classic. And surprisingly, it's the one Buckingham Nicks era album from Fleetwood Mac that has not been pressed or reissued 10,000 times over the last couple of years. Because it seems like every other week there's some Fleetwood Mac album getting reissued, and it's not Tusk. Actually, I guess I was wrong. I just looked, and this is the 5th time in the last 5 years this album's been reissued. So every Fleetwood Mac album is being reissued all the time, it seems like. But that one's getting reissued on the 10th. This next one is one I'm definitely looking forward to. This one I'm definitely going to grab on the 10th. This is Minstrel in the Gallery by Jethro Tull. It came out back in 1975. It was their 8th studio album. It was a 50th anniversary release. It's came out gray and black marble vinyl. It's going about $25. This is quite possibly the band's most underrated album. Musically, I think it's a lot closer to the earlier stuff they released in the 70s. Albums like Aqua Long, Stand Up, those classic Jethro Tull albums that really made them a household name. Even though I did like the 70s albums they released after this one, I really look at Minstrel in the Gallery as the last, really truly classic Jethro Tull album. And maybe it's because Baker Street Muse is easily one of my favorite songs of the 70s. A couple of Ministry albums also coming out on October 10th. The first is The Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste. Came out back in 1989. It was their 4th studio album, 2 LP release. This is an expanded edition that they're releasing. It's running about $39. Ministry is another one of those bands that's slowly having their catalog released over the last year or so by Rhino. And this is a really pivotal and important album in industrial metal. It took Ministry's music to this more hardcore, aggressive direction. And it would lay the groundwork for not only their next couple of albums, but for the genre for the next decade. But surprisingly, it's been a few years since this one's been reissued. I think 2019 was the last pressing of that one. So that one's coming out on the 10th. So is Psalm 69. It was released back in 1992. It was our 5th studio album. 2 LP release. It's also an expanded edition. It's going to run about $39. This is very much a continuation off of what they did off their previous album. I know I said The Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste was an expanded edition. I didn't see how many extra tracks were on that one. I know this one has 7 additional bonus tracks, though. And Psalm 69 would go on to be one of the more influential tracks for industrial music in the 90s. And then the last 3 albums I have for October 10th are the first 3 albums from Mr. Bungle. The first one is their self-titled debut album from 1991. It's a 2 LP release. It's going to be on translucent orange vinyl. It's going to run about $35. This is easily one of the more unique sounding albums of the early part of the 90s. If you're unfamiliar with Mr. Bungle, they're an experimental rock band fronted by Mike Patton from Faith No More. This album has become a cult classic over the years. But to be completely honest, it's a tough listen for me. I know a lot of people love this album. I've only listened to it a couple of times, and I need to revisit it because it's been a very long time since I have listened to it. Like I said, it's just a very, very unique sounding album. I think it's easily I've never been a big fan of Mr. Bungle, but I think of the 4 Mr. Bungle albums, I think it's probably the worst of the 4. But like I said, I know there's a lot of people out there that absolutely love that album. So that one's coming out on the 10th. You've also got Disco Volante. It was released in 1995 as their 2nd studio album. 2 LP release is going to be on translucent light blue vinyl. It's going to be about $35. And for an experimental rock band, Disco Volante was probably their most experimental album. You've got elements of metal and jazz. There's Middle Eastern in there. There's tango in there. It even has some easy listening in there. Like I said, it's very, very interesting, very unique album. Not as unique as their self-titled album, though. If you're unfamiliar with their music, Disco Volante is a good place to start. I just wouldn't start with their debut album. I would either start with Disco Volante or California, which, speaking of California, that's the 3rd and final album coming out on the 10th. It was released in 1999. It was their 3rd studio album. 2 LP release is going to be on translucent ruby vinyl. It's going to be about $35. Definitely more of a blend of pop and still avant-garde. I think it's way more of an accessible album than their first 2 albums. I think it's kind of widely seen as their best album overall. They did release an album in 2020. I think I've only listened to maybe 3 or 4 songs off of it. If you're going to listen to anything, if you've never listened to anything from Mr. Bungle, I think California is probably the best place to start with. And then rounding out the video today, there's only 2 albums getting released on October 17th, which is kind of strange because on October 3rd, I think there's 16 albums getting released. And then on the 10th, I think there's 11. And then you've only got 2 albums getting released on the 17th. I would think there'd be a better way to kind of spread those out a little bit more. But that always seems to be the case, where there's 1 week where there's 1 or 2 or 0 albums that get released. But the first one for the 17th is The Doors' Greatest Hits, released in 1980. This is a Rhino Reserve release. It's going to be about $32. It's easily one of the best-selling greatest hits compilations of all time. It's got 10 of the band's best-known songs on there. My issue with this is, with a band like The Doors that has so many great songs, it's hard to pick just 10 songs and adequately represent the greatness of their career. If you want a proper greatest hits compilation, you're easily going to have at least probably double that number of songs. Because I think you almost kind of do them a disservice to just pick 10 songs. I think what makes them so great are not just all the big hits from across their career, but all those lesser known songs that were equally as good, that you could probably almost make a greatest hits compilation of just from those tracks. So it's Rhino Reserve release, so I'm sure it's going to sell really well on the 17th. And the last one I've got, this is kind of an interesting release. This is one I was a little surprised to see on the list. This is Bare Trees by Fleetwood Mac. Came out back in 1972. It was their 6th studio album. It's also a Rhino Reserve release. It's going to run you about $32. If you're going to pick a Fleetwood Mac album to release for a special event, Bare Trees is probably not going to be the album I would pick. And don't get me wrong, I don't think it's a bad album. Actually, I think it's the complete opposite. It's an album where I don't think it gets the respect that it really deserves. This is the album where I think Christine McVie really came into her own as a music writer. I mean, commercially, it did really well. It hit number 70 on the Billboard 200. In a lot of the ways, it would kind of lay the foundation for what they would do over the next couple of albums before Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks would join the band. So while I'm kind of surprised to see it's on the list, I'm actually really happy to see it's getting reissued. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys are looking forward to grabbing from October 10th and October 17th for Rhino Rocktober. Like I said earlier, if you missed part 1 of this series, go back and watch that with all the albums from October 3rd. Because Rhino's releasing a lot of great stuff over the month of October. Like I said, there's 43 albums overall. So make sure you come back tomorrow and catch part 3 of my series where I go over the last 2 weeks of the month. But as for the albums I went over in today's video, I definitely grabbed that Jethro Tull album. I probably will grab that Fleetwood Mac album the more I think about it. I guess I should specify and say Bare Trees, because I guess I might grab Tusk also. I forgot I had 2 of their albums in this video. There's also a couple of those Dream Theater albums I need to revisit again, but let me know what you guys are looking forward to. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.